Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Doug Schwartz. He is the polling director for Quinnipiac University, and we will meet him when we come back, so stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Doug Schwartz. He is the director for Quinnipiac University's Polling Institute. It's his first time on the show, so first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you have done a lot of TV and radio stuff, so you're a seasoned veteran at this. What's the first question that people ask you? What I like to do is sort of an introduction to the viewers if they don't know what polling is really. What is it you do? So let's talk about that a little bit, sort of an intro to.
Well, if it's the media, they're asking me who's going to win. Right. That's the first question that I'm going to get asked.
Well, I don't want to spin it in a political sense. I just want to talk about what you do and you know, why things like this were deemed necessary way back when they were sort of developed.
I think the first question I typically get asked is, how do you do it?
Right.
How do you survey 1,000 people and generalize to millions? How does that really work? Can I really trust your poll? That's probably the first question that I get asked.
It is. The Quinnipiac polling is the brand name, I have to tell you, is, but we'll get into that after. Continue.
Well, that's the key question about polling is how can you do it? How can you interview a small subset of the population and then generalize about everyone? And what I always say is the key is that you have to have what's called a random sample. And a random sample is one in which everyone in the population has an equal chance of being selected. And if you follow that fundamental rule of random sampling, your poll should be representative of the public.
Now, do you have to get a large enough sample size in order to be obviously in order to, it's really the math, right?
Right. Well, we shoot for about 1,000, and that gets you a margin of error plus or minus 3 points. Now, you can have a smaller sample and still be representative. It just won't be quite as accurate. For example, if you did half as many. If you did 500 respondents, then your margin of error would increase to about plus or minus 5 points.
Now, when people think of Quinnipiac polling, it's usually in the vein of politics, right? Is there,
and public policy.
Public policy too, but that's still, I kind of put it under the same umbrella. Is that it, or do you venture into other areas as well?
The only time that we will venture off of politics or public policy is this baseball poll that we've been doing annually in Connecticut now for about 10 years, where we'll ask people who their favorite baseball team. And now we've started to do that in some of our other states as well. But it really began in Connecticut because there was such a fierce debate about whether this is Red Sox country or Yankee country.
Well, you know, you can argue it's such a transient state and it's such a split state. First of all, Connecticut is part of New England. Right. But you know, they're watching the show in Rhode Island too. So Rhode Island is certainly more New England, and there are probably far less New York fans than Boston fans in Rhode Island.
Yep.
In Connecticut, that's the split state, you know.
That's right.
And so you know, since that's not politics, you could talk about baseball a little bit. What are you finding?
Yankees have had an edge in every poll that we've done, except once a few years ago. The Red Sox won by a point, but generally the Yankees have been ahead by several points. Our most recent one a couple weeks ago found the Yankees edged out the Red Sox. It's typically, as you said, a divide between the eastern part of the state, Red Sox fans, southern part of the state, southwestern part, Yankee fans.
Now, does it have to do with the marquee value of the teams? Like, for you know, the Yankees, you know, the most impressive sports franchise, you know, arguably. That sort of thing, and also their level of winning compared to the Red Sox.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And the Mets, unfortunately for the Met fans, they are always very low.
In the shadow.
In the shadow, somewhere in single-digit territory.
Wow. And now, again, if you were in Rhode Island, of course, polling people, then, you know, I would say there's probably still they're a national team, so Yankee fans would show up, but I would think you would be more apt to find much more Red Sox fans in there.
Yeah, you know, interestingly, we just did a Florida poll, and you just mentioned the Yankees being a lot of fans wherever you go. They were number one in Florida.
Transplanted New Yorkers. And
That's
you
right.
could have a Yankee Red Sox game in Florida, and you would have a bigger crowd at the game than you would for the Tampa Rays. Or maybe even the Miami Marlins now, because there are so many transplanted Northeasterners down in Florida. So it's interesting to do polls in places where you might be surprised at the outcome because of the demographic that's actually where you're at.
That's right. That was one of the surprising findings. The Yankee fans edged out the Marlin fans and the Ray fans just by a little bit, but who would have thunk?
Now, you as a poller, are you allowed to not? You certainly can't be biased, but are you allowed to express your opinion on your favorite team or anything like that?
I generally don't, because it's such a, like I said, hotly debated issue.
Right. It's up there with the political issues of the world, right?
Right. People care passionately about it. I mean, we get a lot of feedback on that particular poll about, did we survey too many Red Sox fans or too many Yankee fans? There's a lot of passion on both sides. So I don't express my opinion. I just talk about the numbers. But yeah.
In baseball, obviously, you will notice that people will tend to kind of lean toward the front runner. Is it the same thing in politics too when you're polling? If there's a sort of an opinion that someone is in the lead, do people sort of jump on the bandwagon and it kind of skews the results a little bit, or no?
No, that doesn't really happen. Certainly you'll find the people that give the money,
okay,
they tend to follow the leader. They'll go with who's ahead. And that can have an impact ultimately on the vote, because the more money that candidate gets, then they can advertise more and it can increase the size of their lead. But in terms of people changing their vote and jumping on the bandwagon for the winner, we've never seen that kind of an effect. I mean, I could give you a good counterexample from Connecticut. Remember Ned Lamont?
Yes.
And how he started out at zero when he ran for Senate the first time against Lieberman in the Democratic primary. No one had ever heard of Ned Lamont, and Lieberman started out with this huge lead. But over time, he got better known, and he actually defeated Lieberman. So that's an example of people not following the early leader, that Lamont still won even though he trailed badly in the beginning.
Kind of forced Lieberman to go independent, right, so that he could kind of run and eventually get it. But,
that's right. Eventually, Lieberman did win that race because, as you said, he ran his own independent ticket.
So is perception reality when people look at polls and just assume, oh, well, then, I'm going to go, he's clearly in the lead, so, let's jump on board with the winner. But apparently not, like you said.
Right.
Ned Lamont started out with zero,
Right. The news coverage also is affected by...
I knew you were going to bring the media into it.
So, being ahead in a poll does help in terms of not just fundraising, but positive news stories. So if you're way out ahead, then the press is saying, wow, what's this candidate doing right? And the stories about the other candidate is, what's that candidate doing wrong? So it helps in those two respects, but not in terms of affecting people's opinions. I mean, people vote for who they want to vote for. They're not going to vote for whoever's ahead in the polls. I mean, we'd find also that our polls would be, really way off, too, if that ended up happening.
I don't think, I think there's, just my opinion, there's a lot of uninformed voters, and I think they'll use polls as a source of, well, he must be good because he's leading in the polls. And, people who will just follow the party line and just click the D's or the R's when they go into the polling booth, so I would imagine that sometimes people who don't do that will just maybe use the polls as one of their sources. It may not necessarily be an informed source for them because they're not getting the message of the particular candidate, but they may use that to base their decision to vote on a particular candidate, right?
Well, I like to think that the poll might inform people in the sense of get them interested in the race. Maybe there hasn't been much news coverage about a particular race, and then we come out with a poll, well, then they're reading about the race, they're reading about the issues. So if that's something, that gets them interested in the race, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and then they can kind of follow the views of the particular candidate and maybe learn a little bit more about them. So talk to me about how it started with Quinnipiac.
Sure.
Go back to that, because Quinnipiac was a fairly small university to start out. And first of all, we were talking about sports before. That has grown with Quinnipiac moving up in basketball and hockey, and they do so well in that. But let's just talk about the poll. How did it happen?
1988, a marketing research professor named Paul Falsigno decided he wanted to teach his students about polling. And so he actually conducted a few Connecticut polls with his students. And they were so well received by the public and the media that the university decided that they wanted to expand. And they brought me aboard in 1994, and we expanded to New York State and New Jersey polling. And since that time, it's been steady growth, if you will. We have now expanded to national polling and swing state polling. We've picked up Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, and our most recent state is Virginia. So we actually poll in 9 different areas, 7 states, as well as New York City and national, and we will poll regularly on politics and public policy. Every two or 3 months, you can count on seeing another Quinnipiac University poll. We don't just parachute in for the elections.
Right.
We are there all the time.
Even not in an election year,
right?
Right. All the time.
That's right. Because there's always issues.
Right.
I mean, we think of our niche really as the state politics and state issues. So we'll follow what's going on in the state legislature, what the governor is up to, and follow what the issues are in the news, and that's what we'll ask people about.
Is that also how you decide to expand, or does someone, maybe in a particular state have to express an interest for you to want to go and kind of get involved in it? How does that work?
The expansion really has been about the swing states and what are people most interested in. So in a presidential election, we've seen that it's come down to just a few states. In 2000, it came down to Florida.
Right.
And in 2004, it came down to Ohio. Looks like it's going to be another very close election. So people are really focusing in on that narrow set of swing states that could really make a difference. Now, we've been focusing on Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida. We actually do a package where we will poll in those 3 states simultaneously. Every candidate who has won 2 out of those 3 states since 1960 has won the election. So we believe these are the keys to the election.
Why does Quinnipiac have such a good name in polling?
I think it's because of our accuracy and our timeliness. Those are the 2 things. So if you track our record in terms of how close do our final polls get to the actual election results, you'll see that we do a good job of predicting the vote. And the other thing is we're just very timely. We poll about whatever the issues are in the news that people want to know about.
Is that why the media tends to gravitate towards the Quinnipiac polls?
I think so.
Yeah.
We don't just disappear. Whenever there's an issue in the news, we're there and we're tapping public opinion.
Well, let's take a break because we've got a lot more to get to. Is there a website maybe people can go and learn more about it?
Yep, www.quinnipiac.edu.
All right. We'll put a graphic up on the screen too. Doug Schwartz, director of the Quinnipiac University Polling Institute. We'll take a break and come back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest is Doug Schwartz. He is the polling director for Quinnipiac University. By the way, Quinnipiac started out as college and then it expanded to university.
That's
too.
right.
Just
Yep.
growing it. Now, I'm a UConn guy, so there's also a connection there with a basketball assistant going down to Quinnipiac. And I used to live near the university, so I just love it. I love most things about it. It's a great school. So we were talking before the break about how the media has embraced the Quinnipiac polling, and that's a good thing too because you see your name everywhere on every network. And regardless of whether it's it's the opinion pieces where the network might be leaning one direction or another, they're still using the Quinnipiac polling, right?
That's right. Whether you're talking about MSNBC
Exactly.
or Fox or CNN, they all use it.
Talk about you a little bit. How'd you get involved?
Well, I started out as a government major. We were talking earlier that actually I went to Connecticut College in New London.
New London, Connecticut, right?
Yeah. And when I graduated, I was looking, okay, what can I do with a government degree? And I found out about this program at University of Connecticut that would give you a master's in survey research in 1 year.
Wow, there's a lot of classes though in 1 year, right?
Well, it wasn't actually that bad. It was about 10 classes.
Okay.
And with that degree, you could get a good job. And so I decided, you know what, this sounds interesting. And I went to the program, graduated, and I ended up with a job at the CBS News Election and Survey Unit. And that was a great experience. I really learned a lot about polling working there. And then I heard about this job at Quinnipiac, actually, while I was working on my PhD in political science. I heard about this job for a director and applied, and it's now almost 20 years since I've been there.
Were you the first director there?
The first one was Paul Falsigno, the marketing research professor, and then myself.
And so it was sort of one guy before you, but he sort of set the path for you to take. Obviously it has grown since you've been. If you've been there 20 years, talk about the differences from then to now.
Well, I guess the differences I'd highlight are the number of polls that we do.
Right.
That when we started out, we were just doing a few polls in Connecticut. Now, as I mentioned, we probably do over 70 polls a year. Also, technologically, there's been a big change.
That was going to be my next question for you too.
We used to just do paper and pencil.
Yeah. Now you're using iPads and laptops.
Well, actually, you're right. No iPads, but we are on. We are in the computer age. Yeah. So we do use computers, something called computer-assisted telephone interviewing, and that started just a couple years after I started at Quinnipiac. So that's probably the biggest change, is we've gone from the paper and pencil, in which you'd have to have one person enter the data from like a stack of hundreds of questionnaires, to now the interviewer, each individual interviewer automatically enters the data. We have 150 interviewer stations. We've actually grown in size. We started out with the room that I began in of about a dozen people and a dozen telephones. We then grew to 40 when we went to the computer-assisted telephone interviewer stations. Then we added some more. We had about 70.
You got to have your own building by now.
And now
right?
they've built, right, exactly. We have our own building, 150 caddy stations.
Wow, that's fantastic. So yeah, and how are you, how much of a connection is there with the rest of the university? Is there a lot of interaction? I mean, is it its own separate entity, or?
Well, we're part of the Department of Public Affairs, and probably the most important interaction is that the students form a large component of our interviewer staff, and we have many marketing research majors, sociology majors, political science, a lot of very interested students who will work for us and learn a lot about survey research and current events on their job.
Now, are those the people that are working for you, or you're polling them?
Oh, they're working for us. They're the ones who are actually doing the calling.
Now, when you're trying to get what you called, a broad range of, demographics, age differences, what kind of differences when you're trying to get a fair amount of for polling purposes? Income, things of that sort, where they live. Talk about all that.
Yeah, well, again, if you do a good random sample, all the demographics should fall into place.
Okay.
You run into problems if you're not doing a good sample, but if you give everyone an equal chance of being selected, it should work. And I'll pull back the curtain just a little bit and tell you some of the things we do to make sure we have a good representative sample. So where do we get our phone numbers? They're all randomly generated by a computer. We don't use phone books. Phone books would skew. You'd only get the listed people who tend to be high income and low income.
Right.
Once we reach a household, we don't automatically talk to whoever picks up the phone. There's a bias there. Women are more likely than men to pick up the phone, so we will randomly select the person to speak with. The technique we use is the next birthday method. We only speak with the person in the household who has the next birthday
coming up.
That's right.
So that's very random, Right. You're finding a lot more cell phones now.
And that's another thing that we do. It's a very important thing, because if we didn't call cell phones, we would be missing a lot of young people. Young people are disproportionately cell phone only. About 30% of the country right now is cell phone only. So really, if you're going to get a good representative population, you have to call people on their cell phones.
That's why when you mentioned the phone book, I couldn't tell you the last time I've used one. You could use it for business more, but still, again, most people have smartphones, you'd be able to just go on the internet and find it that way too. But yeah. And so, talk to me about what the biggest challenge is for you.
Cell phones.
You
brought it up.
Challenge,
I think
really?
cell phones, just because
you can't
growing,
get the number, or?
Well, it's just growing so quickly. It's changing the way pollsters do what they do. Traditionally we call people on their landline at home, but now with so many people leaving their landlines for the cell phone, it's making it a lot harder. I mean, just think about like when we call someone on a cell phone. I mean, we could be calling you right now when you're busy at work, or maybe you're driving or crossing the street. It's a lot harder to interview someone on the cell phone. So it's a lot more costly, it's less efficient, but that's the way the population is going, is increasingly cell phone.
Are you involved in social media at all, if you think of the people are there on it as well these days?
We are not, but I think you're onto something there. That
when you talked about the kids and you talk about what they're using cell phones, and I don't mean to just target that demographic, but if that is the future, and that's what more and more you said, 30% of people only have cell phones now. How many people are involved with social media now, in this country?
No, you're right. It's just a question of, how do you get a good, random sample? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, because then that is there's a certain demographic that tends to be on that as well, just like the cell phone. So what do you do,
Yeah.
So what's the future hold?
Well, the future for Quinnipiac, hopefully, is, continued growth, maybe pick up more swing states in the future, and continuing to do what we do. I mean, in the short term, we've got a big presidential election in 5 months, so that's going to be our focus. But at the same time, we'll continue to do our state level issues as well.
And you mentioned to me off the air that you do a lot of TV hits and radio stuff too. So I would imagine as we get closer, you're going to be doing a lot more of that too. You personally, or do you have other people that are specifically designed to talk to the media? Or?
Well, my focus is Connecticut. So when we do a Connecticut poll, I'm the spokesperson for all our Connecticut stuff, and I'm responsible for the methodology for all our polls. But in all of our other states that we do, we have experts who are our analysts there. Peter Brown is our analyst in Florida and Virginia and Ohio. Tim Malloy is our expert in Pennsylvania. Mickey Carroll's our expert in New York and New Jersey. So I'm lucky. We have all of these experts working in these different states. They are the ones who are working with the media in these different states.
It sounds like your job as director is very diverse. You're the de facto PR person for Connecticut, at least, but you were talking about what you do and structure things, and there's a lot of hats you're wearing, I would imagine, and there's a lot of different day-to-day duties that you perform.
Well, that's what I enjoy about the job. No one day is the same, and especially in being in the news business, as you know, the issues change every day. You never know what's going to happen, what's going to happen in the campaign, what's going to be said. Is there going to some gaffe, or what's the big issue? What's going on in foreign affairs? Right now, it looks like there could be a civil war in Syria. How's that going to affect things? So there's always something going on, and plus all these different states that I get to watch. What are the different issues in the different states? So there's a lot of variety in my job that I like.
You have a paid staff. Do you have volunteers that you use too?
No volunteers.
Okay.
Everyone is paid. The interviewers are paid $9.50 an hour. It is one of the highest on-campus jobs, and we have a full-time staff as well.
That's excellent. One more time on the website as we wrap up the show today, so people can go and learn more. www.quinnipiac.edu, and then look for the link to the Polling Institute, and you'll see all of our press releases. And also, I have a blog. I blog on current polling issues. So. Very nice. Doug Schwartz, the director for the Quinnipiac University Polling Institute. Pleasure having you on the show. A pleasure meeting you, too.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time.